All right, so today we are going to be on chapter 11, section 2 of A Course in Miracles, the invitation to healing. So I'll go ahead and share my screen and we can start here and pause to discuss after this first section. The invitation to healing. If sickness is separation, the decision to heal and to be healed is the first step toward recognizing what you truly want. Every attack is a step away from this, and every healing thought brings it closer. The Son of God has both Father and Son because he is both Father and Son. To unite having and being is to unite your will with his. For he wills you himself. And you will yourself to him, because your perfect understanding of him, you know there is but one will. Yet when you attack any part of God and his kingdom, your understanding is not perfect, and what you really want is therefore lost to you. Healing thus becomes a lesson in understanding. And the more you practice it, the better teacher and learner you become. If you have denied truth, what better witnesses to its reality could you have than those who have been healed by it? But be sure to count yourself among them, for in your willingness to join them is your healing accomplished. Every miracle that you accomplish speaks to you of the fatherhood of God. Every healing thought that you accept, either from your brother or in your own mind, teaches you that you are God's son. In every hurtful thought you hold, wherever you perceive it, lies the denial of God's fatherhood and of your sonship. And denial is as total as love. You cannot deny part of yourself, because the rest will seem to be separate and therefore without meaning. And being without meaning to you, you will not understand it. To deny meaning is to fail to understand. You can heal only yourself, for only God's Son needs healing. You need it because you do not understand yourself, and therefore know not what you do. Having forgotten your will, you do not know what you really want. Healing is a sign that you want to make whole. And this willingness opens your ears to the voice of the Holy Spirit, whose message is wholeness. He will enable you to go far beyond the healing you would undertake. For beside your small willingness to make whole, he will lay his own complete will and make yours whole. What can the Son of God not accomplish with the fatherhood of God in him? And yet the invitation must come from you, for you have surely learned that whom you invite as your guest will abide with you. The Holy Spirit cannot speak to an unwelcoming host because he will not be heard. The eternal guest remains, but his voice grows faint in alien company. He needs your protection only because your care is a sign that you want him. Think like him ever so slightly, and the little spark becomes a blazing light that fills your mind so that he becomes your only guest. Whenever you ask the ego to enter, you lessen his welcome. He will remain, but you have allied yourself against him. Whatever journey you choose to take, he will go with you, waiting. You can safely trust his patience, for he cannot leave a part of God. Yet you need far more than patience. You will never rest until you know your function and fulfill it, for only in this can your will and your Father's be wholly joined. To have him is to be like him, and he has given himself to you. You who have God must be as God, for his function became yours with his gift. Invite this knowledge back into your mind and let nothing that obscures it enter. The guest whom God sent you will teach you how to do this if you but recognize the little spark and are willing to let it grow. Your willingness need not be perfect because his is. If you will merely offer him a little place, he will lighten it so much that you will gladly let it be increased. And by this increase, you will begin to remember creation. Would you be hostage to the ego or host to God? Will you accept only whom you invite? You will accept only whom you invite. You are free to determine who shall be your guest and how long he shall remain with you. Yet this is not real freedom, for it still depends on how you see it. The Holy Spirit is there, although he cannot help you with your invitation. And the ego is nothing, whether you invite it in or not. Real freedom depends on welcoming reality. And of your guests, only the Holy Spirit is real. Know then who abides with you merely by recognizing what is there already. And do not be satisfied with imaginary comforters, for the comforter of God is in you. I want to welcome Katie today. Hi, Katie. Hi, Carol. Glad you joined. Looks like Mary is back with us. So we just read section 2 of chapter 11, and typically what we do, Katie, is we go ahead and we read and then we discuss afterwards. I think you were here before, right? Yeah. I think this is the first time we're seeing you, so it's nice to see you. Hi, Alicia. Good to have you here. So this was a wonderful section. Does this bring up anyone? Any thoughts in anyone? Anything anybody wants to share?
I was surprised to see a reference to the guest, which I haven't really seen that before in the course. I think it's a reference to the Holy Spirit in paragraph 6, sentence 5. The guest whom God sent you.
Yes. Anything that's capitalized is always of God or of the Holy Spirit. So yes, they are referring to the Holy Spirit there. Yes.
I've not seen him referred to as the guest before.
As the guest, yeah. Sometimes he's called the bridge. Sometimes I refer to him as the cosmic goo.
I like that.
That's my sci-fi brain. It's the cosmic goo that connects you to the one mind of God. Good to have you here, Liz. We just read section 2 on chapter 11, and we're discussing it now for a few minutes.
Great, thank you.
I really love this part because it helps you to understand that it's your choice who you align with and who you invite in, right? And the Holy Spirit's always there. It's just a matter of whether or not you can hear the voice. And I think it spoke to a lot of what we were discussing in the half an hour prior before starting reading today. And I wanted to mention that to everyone who's here. I open this room at 12 o'clock for anybody who wants to join early and just talk about anything. And we had a lot of discussions today that are very relevant to what I just read. So I always think that's wonderful how that works.
Yes, I would like to order, but I'm in a group.
I'm going to mute Mary for a minute. She can do her ordering.
Something rather silly is I got my comforter of God out last night for the first time. So.
Your comforter of God, what is that?
Well, it's the last sentence that we read. It was chilly last night, so I got my comforter out.
Oh, there you go. Comforter of God. That's awesome.
Dawned on me when you read that. I went, oh yeah.
Got my comforter of God out. it reminds me of what I talked about last week too, that little spark, right? And I think what happens is when you're aligned with the ego, you're still in the, what do I need? What don't I have? Why am I not whole? Why am I not complete? And then when you're aligned with love, you're more in that, I am whole, like I am complete. How can I be of service? And it took me a long time to like switch from that, because I thought, I don't want to be of service. I just want to have fun. I want to enjoy life. I want more of everything out here. I want a great relationship. I want amazing children. I want a big house. I want all the nice things. And yeah, I want to share that with everybody, but I want that, and then the whole idea of being of service was like, I don't understand what that means. I don't know what being of service means. And it wasn't until I got to that point where I just lost faith in all of it, because none of it was happening the way I thought it should or would or could, and I just was like, I'm not interested. I'm not interested in this anymore. And then I was like, oh, what's this feeling of joy in my heart? I don't even know what that is, because I never looked for it in here. And when I started just growing that spark into that blazing light, because I was aligning now with God or source or the universe or love or whatever your name is for that, because we all know that words are but symbols of symbols. That's when life changes, right? And you can enjoy all of the abundance of life, because then it just flows freely to you. You don't have to want it anymore, because then it just happens, because you're now aligned with that mind of love, and you don't have to worry about getting anymore. You're just thinking about, how can I give? And the more you think of how can I give, the more comes in. It's just the way it flows, the way life flows. It's amazing. Like that.
Yeah, the life that you seemed to want previously and you couldn't have, it seems to be happening now for you.
Absolutely. It's just happening. I'm not even trying to make it happen, right? It's just a byproduct of being love. It's a byproduct of being aligned with love.
So when you give love, love comes back and you're filled. You don't have to worry about all that.
Right. And not only, you don't even look for it, because you're so filled with it. It's no longer a craving, because you already have it. You have so much that you just want to give it and give it and give it and give it.
Gil Gibran, a line from, I think it's the Prophet, talks about, I had a dream last night that life was joy. And I woke and I found that life was service. And as I served, I found that service is joy.
Ah, I love that. I just got truth bumps. That's so good, Carl. I love that. Oh, you should make like a poster out of that with some of your artwork.
I use it on my,
Yeah, that would be awesome.
Yeah, that would be beautiful.
I use
Well,
it
I'll
on my
fix it later.
applications whenever I'm applying for any jobs. They say wired. It's about service.
That's so awesome. I love that. I love that.
Was that
I've come to really recognize that for me, that is what it is. And if I had to sum up, like, we always want to know what, why are we here, and what is our destiny, and how do we, make our mark, and all that stuff that the little ego thinks about, and what did God want from me? And, my conclusion now through the experience is God only wants us to be happy, and everything else flows from that. If we can just remember our peace and our joy, that's what God wants for us. Beyond that, in that state of being, we manifest all the rest for ourselves. But it's through that state of happiness and peace that we are abundant and united with God.
Right. And I love that, because sometimes when I hear God only wants for us, I still, for some reason, envision God out there. But then when I remember, who is God that only wants for us? Oh, I am God. I am part of that mind of God. So of course I only want for myself joy. And we read that in paragraph 1, the Son of God has both Father and Son because he is both Father and Son, to unite having and being. So of course the Son of God only wants us to be joyful because that's what we are. We are God. We are love. We are of that one mind of God. And why wouldn't we just want joy and happiness all the time? And that's, of course, why God feels that happiness when we are happy and joyful, because we are that one mind of God. It just goes back and forth. All right, shall we keep going, or would anybody like to add anything else? Moving on from darkness to light. When you are weary, remember you have hurt yourself. Your comforter will rest you, but you cannot. You do not know how. For if you did, you could never have grown weary. Unless you hurt yourself, you could never suffer in any way, for that is not God's will for his Son. Pain is not of him, for he knows no attack, and his peace surrounds you silently. God is very quiet, for there is no conflict in him. Conflict is the root of all evil. For being blind, it does not see whom it attacks, yet it always attacks the Son of God, and the Son of God is you. God's Son is indeed in need of comfort, for he knows not what he does, believing his will is not his own. The kingdom is his, and yet he wanders homeless. At home in God, he is lonely, and amid all his brothers, he is friendless. Would God let this be real when he did not will to be alone himself? And if your will is his, it cannot be true of you, because it is not true of him. Oh, my child, if you knew what God wills for you, your joy would be complete. And what he wills has happened, for it was always true. When the light comes and you have said, God's will is mine, you will see such beauty that you will know it is not of you. Out of your joy, you will create beauty in his name, for your joy could no more be contained than his. The bleak little world will vanish into nothingness, and your heart will be so filled with joy that it will leap into heaven and into the presence of God. I cannot tell you what this will be like, for your heart is not ready. Yet I can tell you and remind you often that what God wills for himself, he wills for you. And what he wills for you is yours. The way is not hard, but it is very different. Yours is the way of pain, of which God knows nothing. That way is hard indeed, and very lonely. Fear and grief are your guests, and they go with you and abide with you on the way. But the dark journey is not the way of God's Son. Walk in light and do not see the dark companions, for they are not fit companions for the Son of God, who was created of light and in light. The great light always surrounds you and shines out from you. How can you see the dark companions in a light such as this? If you see them, it is only because you are denying the light. But deny them instead, for the light is here and the way is clear. God hides nothing from his Son, even though his Son would hide himself. Yet the Son of God cannot hide his glory, for God wills him to be glorious and gave him the light that shines in him. You will never lose your way, for God leads you. When you wander, you but undertake a journey that is not real. The dark companions, the dark way, are all illusions. Turn toward the light, for the little spark in you is part of the light so great that it can sweep you out of darkness forever. For your Father is your creator, and you are like him. The children of light cannot abide in darkness, for darkness is not in them. Do not be deceived by the dark comforters, and never let them enter the mind of God's Son, for they have no place in his temple. When you are tempted to deny him, remember that there are no other gods to place before him, and accept his will for you in peace, for you cannot accept it otherwise. Only God's comforter can comfort you. In the quiet of his temple, he waits to give you the peace that is yours. Give his peace that you may enter the temple and find it waiting for you. But be holy in the presence of God, or you will not know that you are there. For what is unlike God cannot enter his mind, because it was not his thought, and therefore does not belong to him. And your mind must be as pure as his, if you would know what belongs to you. Guard carefully his temple, for he himself dwells there and abides in peace. You cannot enter God's presence with the dark companions beside you, but you also cannot enter alone. All your brothers must enter with you, for until you have accepted them, you cannot enter. For you cannot understand wholeness unless you are whole. And no part of the Son can be excluded if he would know the wholeness of his Father. In your mind, you can accept the whole sonship and bless it with the light your Father gave it. Then you will be worthy to dwell in the temple with him, because it is your will not to be alone. God blessed his Son forever. If you will bless him in time, you will be in eternity. Time cannot separate you from God if you use it on behalf of the eternal. I love that. You cannot enter without your brothers, and not just one or two of them, all of them. You have to know your wholeness and your completeness in all of your brothers. And that goes back to that shift, right? That shift of having and wanting to being of service. Because once you can be like God, then you can know him, right? And being like him really means being of service to all of your brothers, being like him in every way, to know him. And really to know yourself, right? Because everything else is just part of the separation and part of the illusion.
It's quite a tall order to be like God, to be able to be in his presence.
But if you know yourself as God,
Yeah.
right, that's your first
Yeah.
step, right, Freddie?
Yeah. But it means letting go of all those ego thoughts that are nothing like God's.
Right, to be mindful of your companions, to be mindful of who you're choosing to be your companions. And it just starts with just the acknowledgement and the vigilance, right? What am I thinking now? Am I choosing love or fear? You have 60,000 thoughts a day, 60,000 opportunities a day to choose love or fear. And just to watch your mind, watch your thoughts, spend even 5 minutes watching your thoughts.
Yeah. Is that what it means by your companions? What kind of thoughts you're entertaining?
Yes.
Really?
That's the start.
Similar to that idea about the guest, which is not talked about in the workbook at all, but is spoken about infrequently in the text and seems to have another side to it, seems to have this dark side to it. In this paragraph where it seems to indicate here there's a challenge to guard carefully his temple, for he himself dwells there and abides in peace. And see, if I do not then abide in peace, then what have I to learn yet? Still something about the guarding this temple still is a challenge to me. It still is something that I'm being asked to do this, to guard this temple. So even if I don't abide in peace, how is it that I'm still challenged to do this? how is it that I'm still hearing that message? It's directly for me. Well, why do I hear it? It's directly for me because I hear it no matter which way that I seem to want to turn. If I want to turn away from this, I hear it as a challenge that I'm damned if I do and damned if I don't. Or if I face it squarely and say to myself, why am I not at peace? Then let me come to peace first, because obviously I must be at peace to see what guarding this temple is about.
Right. And the temple you're guarding, it first begins with your thoughts, right? If you could think of your mind as the temple, and are you allowing thoughts to come in that aren't in alignment with love? You can only be aligned with two things, fear or love. That's it. Two choices. Everything that you think of. Everything that's above the bar is love. Everything below the bar is fear. Power versus force. David Hawkins has an amazing, amazing chart. If you ever want to see where you're at, you'll be able to find yourself immediately based on how you process your thoughts. And then you can just make a conscious effort, right? And not beat yourself up for it, and not, not have to feel that pang of guilt. Just be like, okay, I'm learning. I allow myself to learn at this moment. And if you choose fear, just say, okay, well, at least I noticed that I chose fear. Now I can choose something else. And know that every minute is an opportunity to begin again. It doesn't matter what you did even a second ago, because that's no longer real. That's now part of the past. The only real moment is now. So you don't ever have to beat yourself up for what you did 5 seconds ago, 5 minutes ago, 5 hours, 5 days, 5 years ago, because that it no longer exists. The only real moment is now. And if you can start watching your thoughts now, that's all that matters. That will get you there.
Many years ago, I met a woman who did this muscle testing that seemingly was something that David Hawkins used and talked about sometimes. And, I was very disturbed at the time, mostly. And yet she could tell the truth from me because the muscle testing worked.
It's amazing.
So it demonstrated to me that the truth actually abides in our mind and we're oblivious to it. And she demonstrated to me this was true. I actually believed her, even though I couldn't really allow myself to be peaceful. I did see the fact that she demonstrated to me. There seemed to be a part of my mind that knew myself, whereas I didn't know myself.
Right.
I still remember that because it was quite a, there was quite an alert that sort of went off there. It's like, oh, so who am I afraid of, really? What's this fear all about? It began to be a turning point for me. I turned to psychology and that sort of thing, the way I went, but it began to become a turning point, though, just for me to see there's something that I'm looking for, and I don't really want to find it, obviously.
Sometimes we find it in roundabout ways, right? We all learn differently. I mean, I personally have always been someone who needed to learn by experience, apparently. So I've had many opportunities to learn by experience, and to finally get to that point of gratitude for those experiences that I had other names for in the past.
So this guest thing, I think, is an important aspect of this particular chapter, and later again in chapter 29 talks about the guest. And guarding carefully his temple is really a challenge to ourselves to see, am I abiding in peace?
Right.
As if I'm abiding in peace, obviously, there's no work then to guarding this temple.
Right.
Very simple process then. There's nothing to guard. There's no harm can ever come to this peacefulness.
Well said, Eric.
So the muscle testing was something that really kind of changed me too, because when we were talking about at the very beginning, Eric, I can relate to being like an intellectual and discovering so many of these things that was like, wow. I just never would have guessed that my brain could have wrapped around this knowing of something that's not theoretically tangible. It's just something that you have to believe within. And the connection of muscle testing is that intrinsic knowing of the higher self that on a cell level, your body can recognize, is this love or is this fear-based? And it was a big deal for me too, because it actually merged the two worlds together pretty heavily for me. And David, then back to what Terry was saying about the emotional scale, that's something that I actually have taped up in my office. So not only can I check very frequently about where I myself am at, but when I'm coaching people, because I can look at that scale and go, this person is absolutely operating from jealousy. There's no way I'm going to be able to quantum leap her into unconditional love tomorrow, but I can help her get to emotion that's just slightly above this, which to her might not feel logical because it's not love, but it is an energy she can get to today. So she feels some relief from the lower level feeling that she's experiencing right now. And then to take that back to what we're just reading, what I really, really admire about the course is how much it definitely is about your own individual journey, but how much it encompasses everybody else. Because I always try to tell people who are not woohooey yet, like thinking about humans, and the reality base is that Homo sapiens were babies. You know, the earth has been around for millions and billions of years, whatever you wanted to believe, but humans in conscious form are only 200,000 years old, roughly. So as a group conscious, David Hawkins talks about the fact that we're only collectively about 12 years old. We're running around as prepubescent people. And there's obviously a number of us who are personally developing where we're probably 15, 16, 17-year-olds, but we are not all wise as much as we think we are, just because our bodies age and we kind of develop the look of it. So this consciousness it's very freeing and it's very relieving in the surrender to the let it go, just let it go. That's the control aspect of that primal thing that we have to do to survive as humans. And then to give it up to a higher power is just unnerving, but then somehow cathartically releasing at the exact same level. It's just bizarre. It's bizarre to me. It's good though. Good bizarre.
Yeah.
It's interesting about the maturity. Something I struggled with I was a teacher for a long time. And so in the classroom, I had my routine. I just studied adult educational process, and I just followed the book. Basically, I just followed it this way, and this is it. It's going to work. It did. But I didn't have that same peaceful confidence outside of my classroom. And developing that was not what I was about. Obviously, I was not, that was not coming from within me. It was what teaching did. Teaching struck me and then came from within, and it was easy. Doing this other work, this, day-to-day work, this more unstructured service work was very difficult for me. I felt not peaceful at all. I drank too much. I just tried to avoid it, really. And I found the same thing really after that. Now looking back on it with muscle testing, it's like there was a peacefulness there for me to have, which I did use in part of my life, but which I refused to use in any other part of my life. And this is where the immaturity was then, So if it takes humans 14 billion years to develop, which is the universe is supposedly 14 billion years, then we're a long way from that being only perhaps 200,000 years as humanity goes. But humanity isn't what's really waking up, really. Really, it seems to be that humanity is waking up, but is it really? Don't we really see more conflict and more confusion and more chaos and more contradiction than perhaps we maybe ever did? Certainly as much, at least, if not more. Don't we see more difficulties with it outside, as far as how that it's threatening us now and taking away our freedom to have a pleasant day if we live on the coast or if we live in an area where the forest is burning or whatever, aren't we really challenged more so to find that we abide in peace than ever before, maybe in history? If we weren't in war, if we weren't threatened in some other way, because we could look at different pockets of reality all through all of history and see, of course, people's lives have been threatened all along. But on a global level, has it ever happened like that before? And, I see, that was my chaos. That was my confusion. That was my that was how I lived in my mind. Sick like that. Like I was always under attack, not knowing that I was attacking myself.
Mhm.
So how are we going to see as humanity that we're attacking ourselves? And, is it possible? If we don't guard our temple, if it's possible.
It's interesting because I see that we're thinking that it's so much worse now because it's global. And I think really what it is we just have more views into the global world through all of these social media outlets and the internet and the connections that we have with people all over the world. Like, look at this group right here. This would have never existed, back in the day. We're all over the world. And I think, again, it just becomes another ego distraction that says, oh, the whole world is messed up. How would we ever fix it? And
That's exactly what I'm referring to. I think it's too much for us to try and believe that we can fix it. And I don't think we really need to concentrate on fixing it. We need to buy in peace instead.
Right. So it's all about.
It isn't humanity that's evolving. It's the mind. It's becoming itself. It's, noticing this. As I was a teacher, it was easy. As I wasn't a teacher, it wasn't easy. Why? What was the difference?
Right.
My mindset of my mind would attack me outside of my classroom.
Yeah. And it's just,
things I would be nervous. I'd be a freaking wreck. And I would have to drink because I couldn't stand myself. So I did. But it didn't help, obviously. I can tell you, obviously, because of a long history of mine it was obvious to me. But it wasn't helpful. It didn't help me at all. And it made things worse, actually, in the end. And it made things worse earlier on, too, but I didn't notice it. So does, for a lot of people, it seems like being alert to what's going on in the world makes them suffer. And I'm saying, no, we need to abide in peace and look carefully at that with each other about what's happening in the world. Because what's happening in the world, we don't want to see that reflected in ourselves. We want to see peace abiding in ourselves, because otherwise we're of no use to each other in the world outside ourselves, where we can wake up together, but not as humanity. Humanity is never going to wake up. Humanity is going to die. It's supposed to die. It never was made to be real. I don't think. We were human.
I think you would probably really enjoy David Hawkins. I mean, he's got books upon books upon books, but like the lecture Transcending the Levels of Consciousness was a game changer for me in a sense, because like what you were speaking about is that in the physical realm, we've had 2 world wars that we recognize, right? And what the spiritual realm talks about is that we are already in the 3rd World War, and we have been since roughly 2012, when the Mayan calendar ended. And so this is now spiritual warfare. And so what you say is exactly true, at least to how I believe it, is that we will not entirely wake everybody up, because what David Hawkins talks about is that in this physical reality of 3D dimension, Earth is the place that spiritual beings come to challenge themselves. It is one of the hardest planets to have an experience on. And so duality will always exist. It will never be a planet that we are all Buddhas, because then the planet would then implode upon itself. It lives in duality. That's how its existence is. And what it talked about is that there is majority mass of us, or 1000%, like we talked about, running at a 12-year-old mentality. We can't physically have too many souls who run at a caliber at Jesus and Buddha level, because that's the balance. There's only a few of us that can balance out the mass of us. Otherwise, we would start to implode with the too much good, not enough quote unquote bad, which is just bizarre and weird, because that's what we're kind of studying here, is about that self-peace. But you're right, it's always going to have that counterbalance for the challenge and for the experience and for the awakening. So you're right, the individual challenge of ourselves is what contributes to the collectiveness, I think.
Survival and procreation is what humanity is about. It's never going to advance to truth. You can't.
But does it matter? Do we need to worry about that? We need not fix it. It's not our job to fix it. And in fact, the state of undoing is very chaotic, and we each go through that, and we'll go through that as a collective. And as to how long that takes, there is no time in spirit, so we need not judge or be invested in any of that. It is our own peace which we seek, and then as we are that, we raise the vibration consciously of others and therefore of the planet. And that's just something that is, and the rest of it is just a distraction for us to engage in it. And it's certainly fun intellectual conversation. And as long as it's fun and not agonizing, we can enjoy the conversation, but we needn't agonize over it, is basically what I'm saying. And in order to help get there, we can use, or I use, affirmative prayer, and used it a lot to see myself. Before I was in the state of peace all the time, I would picture, how would that feel? And then have different scenarios. How would it feel to be in the state of peace when somebody is demeaning me, or somebody's being derogatory or insulting, or, whatever the scenario was? How would it feel to still be in that peace? And is that feeling more than, or what I want more than, the other stuff that comes up when I let myself buy into, what that other person seemingly is doing to me? And lo and behold, the state of peace is what I feel that I am, what I wanted for myself. And then that's, how I was able to manifest that and keep it.
I see. Is abiding in peace then something that is internal, or is it something that is arising with this consciousness, as you say it was arising?
No, I'm not sure I understand the question.
Well, abiding in peace is what I said, that it dawned on me that I must allow myself to realize that peace is always present, and that I must abide in it, as though it is something that if I can attain to by acting as if, then I in fact can know about it, because I can pay attention to what it is I'm learning along the way of understanding what peace really is. Peace is not certainly something that's taught in the world. It's functional, that works. It's all about survival, and it's all about procreation. It's not about peace and truth and justice and knowledge and honesty and so on and so forth. And open-mindedness is not about any of that. It's about fight or flight, survival, not about peace, not about joy. It's not about kindness. It's not about love. We tend to hold on to these things as though they're true in the world outside ourselves, but there's very few examples of them. As Rachel was indicating, there seems not to be a tolerance for too much of that. It seems to be that the world outside ourselves does not know what abiding in peace is. So how can I learn it from the world? I looked for it.
But we don't need to.
And I looked for it. I saw inside myself, there is this muscle testing. There is this knowledge that's there. I don't seem to be aware of it. It seems to come up just like sensations and just like thoughts, independent of anything else. It seems to just arise in my consciousness, in my human mind. Obviously, my human mind is incapable of understanding what peace is and abiding in peace. It's not possible for my human mind to grasp what it's all about. So I stopped wondering about it in terms of evaluating and analyzing it. I started reading instead what the Course was saying about it. And what the Course was saying about it, it's shown to you, it's given to you, it's there for you. It doesn't ever say that we develop it or think about it or we understand it in an intellectual, academic sort of way. It never seems to indicate that academically we can understand what peace truly is. And I don't believe we really can as people. Even if we study the Course for all of our lives, I'm not sure we can understand it as people. I don't think Buddha did. I don't think Christ did either. I think when they spoke about it from spirit. And they had nothing to do with their human mind as far as where this originated from. I
think you're right. I think you're right about that, because like there's a philosophy that says like mind knows, brain, I don't know, the self is whatever. So what you're saying is true. Like as a body, the body acts out of primal. The body is to survive, like you had said, reproduction, survival, and spirit is about this idea of A Course in Miracles. And so you're right. They are always going to be two entities that we have to choose how to merge. Or we've talked about how, Mary's like, just keep living it. And it becomes more natural and more natural. Well, yeah, because you have to beat your programming. You have to beat the primal instance of Is that a tiger in the bushes? No, because I'm not a caveman anymore. Is that a potential rejection if I ask that man out and he says no? They both feel like fear. Will I die from one of them? No, but my body has no idea what the difference is. So you're always trying to tell body, whoa, whoa, whoa. Thanks for trying to keep me alive. I don't need to run away from dinosaurs anymore. So I'm gonna take a breath and then I'm gonna choose how to react. So I don't know if I know the answer, but I think that it's probably a combination slightly of both, perhaps.
So I can't identify with my mind as a body. My human mind, therefore, is not something that I can identify with and use actually for anything to do with spiritual growth. My human mind is null and void as far as that goes, or better yet, really neutral, because it has to become neutral for me to see that it is neither useful nor not useful. It just doesn't exist, really. So I have to stop identifying with it as a person, as an Eric, as a teacher, as a whatever, which labels I still use. I don't completely avoid all that, but I see that I can't identify with that and be on point when I'm talking about what the course has done to change me. It's not changed my heart, my body. It's not changed my mind and my head. It's changed me altogether. I don't identify with a person being a person. I don't believe that we should identify with being people. I believe we should identify with being of service, being genuine, being authentic, and let that be what arises then, at least as much as any other sensation, at least as much as any other difference or difficulty might arise, which does still physiologically. So physiologically, I'm not identifying with being human, but physiologically, my body still is physiological, but it's a disjointed or discrete experience, one and another, and they're not really joined. Joining occurs only in this idea of being peacefully abiding in peace in the spirit, peacefully abiding in unbroken, undivided, uninterruptible truth. As maybe David Hawkins was talking about, I believe he was actually.
Well, let's go ahead and continue so that we can see what the next section
Let's do
has
that.
to say, because I think that is going to be relevant with all of these conversations. Which is the inheritance of God's Son. Okay, never forget that the sonship is your salvation, for the sonship is yourself. As God's creation, it is yours, and belonging to you, it is his. Yourself does not need salvation, but your mind needs to learn what salvation is. You're not saved from anything, but you are saved for glory. Glory is your inheritance, given you by your Creator, that you might extend it. Yet, if you hate part of yourself, all your understanding is lost, because you are looking on what God created as yourself without love. And since what he created is part of him, you are denying him his place in his own altar. Could you try to make God homeless and know that you are at home? Can the Son deny the Father without believing that the Father has denied him? God's laws hold only for your protection, and they never hold in vain. What you experience when you deny your Father is still for your protection, for the power of your will cannot be lessened without the intervention of God against it. And any limitation on your power is not the will of God. Therefore, look only to the power that God gave to save you, remembering that it is yours because it is his, and join with your brothers in his peace. Your peace lies in its limitlessness. Limit the peace you share, and yourself must be unknown to you. Every altar to God is part of you because the light he created is one with him. Would you cut off a brother from the light that is yours? You would not do so if you realize that you can darken only your own mind. As you bring him back, so will you return. That is the law of God for the protection of the wholeness of his Son. Only you can deprive yourself of anything. Do not oppose this realization, for it is truly the beginning of the dawn of light. Remember also that the denial of this simple fact takes many forms, and these you must learn to recognize and to oppose steadfastly without exception. This is a crucial step in the reawakening. The beginning phases of this reversal are often quite painful. For as blame is withdrawn from without, there is a strong tendency to harbor it within. It is difficult at first to realize that this is exactly the same thing, for there's no distinction between within and without. If your brothers are part of you and you blame them for your deprivation, you are blaming yourself. And you cannot blame yourself without blaming them. That is why blame must be undone, not seen elsewhere. Lay it to yourself, and you cannot know yourself, for only the ego blames it all. Self-blame is therefore ego identification, and as much as an ego defense as blaming others. You cannot enter God's presence if you attack his Son. When his Son lifts his voice in praise of his Creator, he will hear the voice for his Father. Yet the Creator cannot be praised without his Son, for their glory is shared, and they are glorified together. Christ is at God's altar, waiting to welcome his Son. But come wholly without condemnation, for otherwise you will believe that the door is barred and you cannot enter. The door is not barred, and it is impossible that you cannot enter the place where God would have you be. But love yourself with the love of Christ, for so does your Father love you. You can refuse to enter, but you cannot bar the door that Christ holds open. Come unto me, who hold it open for you. For while I live, it cannot be shut, and I live forever. God is my life and yours, and nothing is denied by God to his Son. At God's altar, Christ waits for the restoration of himself in you. God knows his Son as wholly blameless as himself, and he is approached through the appreciation of his Son. Christ waits for your acceptance of him as yourself, and of his wholeness as yours. For Christ is the Son of God, who lives in his Creator and shines with his glory. Christ is the extension of the love and the loveliness of God, as perfect as his Creator and at peace with him. Blessed is the Son of God, whose radiance is of his Father, and whose glory he wills to share as his Father shares it with him. There is no condemnation in the Son, for there is no condemnation in the Father. Sharing the perfect love of the Father, the Son must share what belongs to him, for otherwise he will not know the Father or the Son. Peace be unto you who rest in God, and in whom the whole sonship rests. So again, it goes back to, this is just an inside job. It's not about fixing your brothers or changing humanity or raising anyone else's consciousness but yourself, because there is only one. There's only one Son of God. And it's the illusion that we are all separate that creates the illusory world that we look on. And the more distracted we get by continuing to look at the illusion, the more we stop doing the work, the more we stop doing the inside work, which is the only work there is to do. And maybe this is a world of illusions that doesn't ever end, but that doesn't mean that we can't transcend it. That doesn't mean that we can't transcend this world and live in the kingdom of heaven if we do the work.
I believe we can die to ourselves, if that's what you mean. I believe we can die to ourselves die to our small s self. I believe we can die to it while we live in the flesh still. It's awkward and it's difficult to continue that process because it is discrete. It is different experiences one day to another, or one moment to another even. But it is something that I believe we can keep present in our mind, that we can die to ourselves. We're not identified with our human mind and not identified with problems outside ourselves as though they are our problems. They really are not our problems, but this is how we meet each other, though. Now, here in A Course in Miracles, it's a little different than it is in the world at large. But at the world, in people here, I believe, are dealing with people in the world at large more so than they're dealing with course students, probably. And even course students can be quite difficult sometimes. But it seems that they're more difficult when they're looking at the world in terms of how it appears to them. What they really want to know is, why does it appear to me this way then? Why do I have difficulties with my husband or with my children or with my boss, whatever? And they want to know for real. That's what they want to know. They really want to know that. That's where their mind really is at. So how do you meet them at their mind level? This is what their problem is. The problem is their pet. The problem is their dying mother. The problem is their child who has, been stricken with some kind of COVID or whatever. All that's what's really going on in the mind as far as what their concern is. Their concern is entirely on those survival opportunities, on that difficulty of peaceful procreating.
Like, I think, again, the more concerned we get with others' problems, the more it pulls us away from our connection to love versus fear. And the more we get away from that, the more we become an unhealed healer. So the only way.
Look at that. Do you not look at how your mind is in balance or not in balance? Like, there is no balance in my mind in terms of a human mind. It's driven by guilt, and it's driven by willful self-pride. It's not driven by concern and care and passion and love for others. My service mind is not my mind, not my human mind. It's this genuine ability to want to help others. And to want to help others, I don't believe that is looking outside myself at all. I believe it's the fact of I really need to see that your mind can be elevated to the peaceful abiding in truth also. And maybe not later, in a minute from now, or maybe not before, a minute earlier, but right now, your mind can be peaceful in that abiding in the truth.
And Course in Miracles says the best way to help heal others is to see them as complete and perfect and whole.
Sorry.
Right.
Did I say otherwise?
No, I'm not saying that you didn't, but it seems to be that your mind is very preoccupied with people's problems.
No, my mind is very open to the fact that I must look at them with the people. I must be willing to look at that. And if you don't want to see it, I must be willing to show you that I see it. Not that I see it because it's a limitation of yours. No, I see it, in fact, that you're limiting yourself. How else can I be honest to help you if I can't show you that you're transgressing your peacefulness, that you don't even know what it is? You don't even know who you are. How can I show you that if I don't allow myself to say, it's pathetic to see it yourself that way. It's pathetic to harm yourself so much. It's pathetic to worry so much about your parents and your teachers and your cousins and your uncles and your bosses and your children's diseases and so on and so forth. But in fact, you must do it, and I see that. So how can I help you otherwise?
But isn't that judgment?
No, it's not. It's just a peaceful.
It sounds like it.
And the fact that I'm commiserating at the same time that I'm telling you, I can't really commiserate with you. I can't really tolerate the fact of that we believe together that you're hopeless or that your life is going to be destroyed because of COVID or whatever that's on your mind. I can't believe that that's true about you. But I do see that that's what you're really occupied with. And that's what you see about what I said. So ask yourself, where's your mind at when you see that? Is your mind with me as you see that? Because I'm at that place where I'm saying to myself, it's pathetic to believe that we're hopeless and so on and so forth. But it's truthful to believe that we must die to ourselves. So it's like Zen sometimes, true, but it's not contradictory.
Well, I definitely went through a period where I needed to die to myself to see the truth and to align with love. And I went down that slippery slope and was definitely in that place of having to be there so that I could finally surrender.
Mhm.
And when I was there, then I could start aligning with love and peace and truly feel that joy inside of myself.
And you have some kind of job, I think. I don't really know what you do though. You heal people or you meet people and have
I'm a life coach.
a life coach.
Yeah.
And Rachel, are you a life coach also?
Rachel, yeah.
Sure. My full-time job right now is, I say intimacy coaching, but it's like in-home partying, but it's much more than that. So I just don't like the word life coach because I think it's so overused. Perspective coaching, space holder, I think that those are better for people, but yes, I would classify it as that. Yeah.
Positivity may be very important to a position as a life coach or as a person that works at a surface level with others. I don't work at a surface level with others. I want to see your soul. And if you won't show me your soul, I'm going to tell you, I can't see your soul because you're blocking it from yourself. You're the one that's keeping it from me to see it. You don't have to do that. You can rise up above that if you want to. You don't have to hide yourself. There's no point to hiding yourself from me, actually, because I was worse than you were, if that's what you're worried about.
And that's how you work with your clients, Eric?
I don't have clients. I just have friends. I don't charge money for anything I do.
Oh, no, you don't have to charge money to have people you work with. I didn't mean a monetary thing.
Yeah, I just have friends.
Yeah. And so that's your process.
My process is to help them see what they really wanted to see. If they ask me to be peaceful, if they ask me about truth, if they ask me about, what's justice all about or whatever, let's come to an answer that you think is true for yourself. If you can evolve in yourself to see that you can find the truth, no matter how hard it seems to be, whether it's about politics or whether it's about religion or whether it's about, healing arts or whatever it is about, you can find a truth within yourself. And you can allow yourself to see that you only blocked it from yourself before that. You never really were, it never really was absent from reality. I'm blocking out reality if I can't see your truth. You tell me how hard it is for you to see it, and I'll tell you how hard it is because I can't see it either. And I'll agree with you on that. But I'll tell you the truth is we're going to see it together if you want to see it. This is how it's done. It's not done by yourself. It's increasingly present in your mind because you're increasingly sharing it with someone else. And that's the only way to increase. God's must be increased always. It's the only way, it works.
Religion has taught us for so long that it is in our doing, if you will, that we are saved, quote unquote. It is through our doing. And the truth of that is, it is through our being. And when we focus on that state of being, then our doing is much more pure. It's not to focus on the doing, on the rewards, on the sacrifice, on the judgment, on the whatever of doing. It is that state of being, that state of true peace and joy that comes from aligning, having our heart lead our head so that it all just becomes one with our soul. And when they are aligned, we are open to that state of being, which is our Christ consciousness, if you will, or higher consciousness, that then all else flows from. If we're still focused on how can we be of service, what can we do, can we change others, how can we improve the world, that's all still very involved in duality and still has covered up that state of peace and joy and connection.
I didn't know that.
I think this is an interesting conversation, and I think, anybody who is on that path of being of service in that way that you are, Eric, and Mary, I know you are too, and Rachel, we all have different people that are attracted to our methodology for whatever reason. They're at a certain place in their life where they resonate with something that we say or do, and they're attracted to our particular style of teaching. And I think that would be a great focus and conversation, maybe to have maybe at our next, pre-Course in Miracles study group half-hour conversation, because it's interesting, right? It's interesting how we all show up in the world and how we all are being of service and what works for us and what works for the people that are attracted to how we're showing up in the world, even though they're not really others, they're just ourselves showing up as our mirrors. Do we want to comment on anything else that I just read in A Course in Miracles before we say goodbye? Because I know we're already beyond the 30 minutes, or I mean the 1:30 ending period. The inheritance of God's Son.
I've got to go now and feed the animals.
All right, Freddie. Well, thank you everyone for joining today.
you.
I
Thank you.
appreciate all of your comments and your sharing, and it's always wonderful to see you all here. And I invite you all to join next week at 12 o'clock for more conversation that is always once again addressed in our reading of A Course in Miracles. It's always very interesting. So thank you everyone for being here. I appreciate all of you, and see you next week.
Yeah,
Thank
bless
you. Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye.